Hello, I'm Karen Long, President and founder of Streamline Government Contracts. Streamline helps small to mid-sized government contractors who seek experienced, effective support with contract management that will help reduce risks, increase profits, and enhance your reputation. We do this by negotiating teaming agreements, subcontract, preparing estimates at completion, and communicating with the contracting officer in their own language. We are the proud sponsors of Government Contractor Chat. We appreciate you joining us today.
Hello, I am Lindsay Riegelsberger, Operations Manager and Marketing Specialist for Streamline Government Contracts. It is my pleasure to introduce Chris Crowder, Executive Vice President of GovCon, and Kim Koster, Vice President of GovCon Strategy for Unanet. Today, they will be presenting the GAGE report lead by forecasting, providing key insights from the 7th annual GAGE report. These insights will help guide companies in optimizing and improving forecasts in areas of cash flow, project costs, labor resources, indirect rates, and more. You will gain perspective on today's government contracting landscape, including what's keeping execs up at night, areas of optimism and challenges, and the implication of the GAGE report's annual benchmarking data. This year's GAGE report also includes a special section on how GovCon small and medium-sized businesses can use forecasting and planning to get in on federal contracting action. So we're excited to hear from you. Without further ado, Chris Crowder and Kim Koster from Unanet.
Lead the GovCon solutions for Unanet. Unanet is an ERP and CRM solution. We have 3,500 or so customers, 2/3 of which are government contractors. Is the industry that I've been both a government contractor selling services in the Department of Veterans Affairs, and prior to joining Unanet was a partner at Baker Tilly, and really have been either a government contractor myself or serving government contractors for the vast majority of my career. So that is me. Ms. Koster, do you want to give yourself a quick intro as we step forward here?
Sure. I'm the VP of GovCon Strategy for Unanet, and I've had the privilege to work in this industry for a little bit over 35 years now, 20-something of that with major contractors, Raytheon and ATK, that is now Northrop. So I've got a lot of experience. And for Unanet, I am a thought leader, one of the founders of this GAGE report, along with our partner Cone Resnick, and look forward to being able to share some of those insights with you today.
Thanks, Kim. So the GAGE survey, and so this sort of provides that background here. Since 2017, Kim sort of alluded to this. We partnered with with an accounting and consulting firm that's headquartered around the DC region, and survey thousands of different government contractors, collect a bunch of different information, and so it's really a benchmarking survey for that informs government contractors on how to best guide their businesses into the future. GAGE is an acronym, and you'll see where it's spelled out here: government contract compliance, accounting utilization, growth, and efficiencies. And so there's basically a chapter in the GAGE report for each of these topics. In addition to that, we also take a special subject each year. And this year's subject was lead by forecasting. And so you'll see lots of call outs throughout the actual GAGE report, which can be downloaded from the Unanet website. If you visit that, you can get the full report. We're obviously going to give you some highlights here today. But if you want the details, you can download that full report directly from the Unanet website. Question that we sometimes get asked is why does Unanet do this survey? It's a considerable investment of time and valuable resources, like Kim. And frankly, there's probably 3 big reasons. Number one is we want to give back to the industry that has given so much to us. It obviously drives the nation, so there are some things around that are really important to us. We also want to give our customers something that they can use to measure themselves, to benchmark themselves against their business, as I alluded to lastly, and as I alluded to earlier. And lastly, we wanted to really collect data that will inform our product roadmap. So as a software company trying to build solutions that will allow government contractors to be more efficient, be more compliant, be more profitable, the information that we collect allows us to inform that roadmap and deliver better on that commitment to our customers. Kim, any comments so far?
No, I just, when we came up with doing this theme, you can actually go back and pull these past GAGE reports, things like leveraging technology, creating a winning proposal. All of them have great information that's still very pertinent today. So you may just go get the 2023 report, but you can also on our website get some of those older reports, and they still have very good data in them.
And if it isn't obvious, we will be doing another GAGE report in 2024. So for those on the call, we hope that you will respond, participate in the one that we do again in 2024. And we hope and expect to be doing this for a long time. So please continue to check in with us and participate in that survey. Obviously, all the data is anonymous. So we aggregate that data and report out, and as you'll see in different bands by revenue and different groupings. We're going to present the data sliced and diced in different ways today. But if there's anything, as we're stepping through this, I'll probably say it a few times. If you would like to see the data in a different way, feel free to reach out to Kim or myself, and we'll make sure that we can help you in that way. As I said, that's a kind of a fundamental tenet for why we do this, is to help our industry and help our customers. So we're excited to do that. All righty. So I think first and foremost, with everything that is going on around the world and the country, around the election, around war, the wars plural, in government contracting, people are optimistic about what our industry is going to look like. We've been very concerned as a broader economy about inflation and hearing things from the Federal Reserve and is a recession coming, and we are lucky to be in an industry that is largely recession proof, and some would say counter-cyclical, and so to the extent that the economy is in a bad place, the government spends more money, and it's good to be a government contractor. I could make the case on the other way, but the point is that folks are optimistic in our industry that the government is going to continue needing their services, and I would agree with them that the government is going to need our services, and frankly, our citizens in our country need the the government contracting industry to stay as strong and robust and vibrant and innovative as it has been. And this, last point on the other one, that is also generally pretty consistent year to year that we've been doing this. They've always been optimistic. We're lucky to operate in the industry in which we do. This is generally consistent, although some of the top items have changed over the years. But rising to the top again is resource. Is attracting and retaining that top talent, which is another somewhat unusual thing in our industry. If you go to others, if you were just going to survey the U.S. economy as a whole, the overall economy is usually going to rise to the top of that chart. In government contracting, you actually see competing for talent and competing for contracts as the top two issues, not the economy overall. So again, something that is unusual about our industry, maybe not surprising to anyone here. Something that is a little bit more unusual here, just sort of note, this breaks it down. This is the first time you're seeing it sliced this way into some of these different categories that I mentioned at the beginning. So you're seeing that question, what keeps executives up at night, broken down by annual revenue of that company, broken down by NAICS code, and broken down by the number of employees in those companies. And so you can see, there aren't some huge differences, but one thing that you might that appeared interesting to me anyway is in that 25 to $50 million. I'll say that the larger end of the mid-sized businesses where they're looking to graduate from the 8A program and stepping into to compete for full and open, you'll see that the overall economy is actually a bigger concern for them than for some of the others. And you'll see that operational efficiency is no longer a concern for them, presumably because they've hit that threshold. They've already invested in a better system and a better back office, et cetera. They know that to compete at the full and open level, they need to have that in place. And so that's one interesting thing to point out when you start breaking it down into these revenue bands. Kim, any thoughts on that?
Can you go back to that prior chart real quick? So
There you go.
when we rank these on the graphs, I just want to point out one thing, that we look at the first and second together. But there are things in the blue that are actually potentially higher. So it would be the number one things that people are concerned about. So as you walk through these charts, that's something that you might want to also take a look at. Right now my eyes go to 1 and 2, but there is some interesting things in that, and some interesting insights in the way these charts are actually created.
That's a really good point, Kim. I think Kim and I also want to when we talk about the survey, if our UAD asks, what does it represent? What does it cover? And this slide is meant to sort of summarize the respondents. And if I look at mine, Kim will know this, but let's call it 1,500 different responses, round numbers. It's fairly representative of the government contracting industry as a whole. So if you see that breakdown of that wheel, it's not shaped like a pie, but it serves the same purpose as a pie chart. You'll see that 54% of the respondents are in that under 25 million, and that's in that SMB market, and frankly only 13% are larger than 250 million in annual revenue, and that's largely pretty consistent with the number of companies that we're going to see in the government contracting community. So that is statistically significant and gives us great confidence in the data that we're seeing. You can also see the respondents by job title, with a strong bias towards the finance team and the C-suite. So you can kind of see that along the right too. Any comments on this one, Kim?
Yeah, so you're definitely getting, in my opinion, you're definitely getting the voice of the executive, or at least top management. So, I think that makes this data look, from a strategy perspective, even more attractive. So, you can really start to understand what strategies and that people are employing.
All right, and so here's a little bit more detail on the respondents as far as breaking it down rather than by revenue, by number of employees. And so you'll see, a lot of the 42% have fewer than 100 employees. Well, you can see it there. I won't go through, but you'll see it broken down by the number of employees. And then you'll also see it broken down by where they provide their services and products. So DoD, biggest industry, or biggest agency rather, is not a surprise to any of us, but that's getting the most. Civilian. There is a commercial segment, so a lot of the respondents had a mix of both government contracting work and non-government work. And so I think that is interesting, and again, pretty consistent with those companies that are out there. They're providing services both to Army, and they're also providing services to commercial companies. All right.
All right, so let's start talking about my favorite topic. It is definitely near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure it is to everybody else who's on the call that's either in finance, or I don't know if everybody's in finance, or we have some project management, potentially some project management folks that may be on the call. But I think we can all agree that having a disciplined process around forecasting can really have a major effect on your business, both from a predictability perspective, and as well as being able to formulate your strategic plans, understand where you're going. When you think about forecasting, there are so many people who are actually touching that forecast. It's you may have 10 different people touching one project forecast. at a high level, and 30 depending on the size of your project. So a lot of different moving parts, and a lot of different things to think about as you're looking at those forecasts. All right, so we actually picked 8 different types of forecasts, which we believe covered the gamut of cost for a government contractor. And we do have an agency that puts this data together for us. So as Chris was saying earlier, it is anonymous. And so we don't actually see who it is. But we really got some great information here, and they put this chart together for us. So 2 of these bubbles actually really stand out to me, which was cash flow and pipeline. And what we did in each one of these 8 sections was we dug deeper into whether or not that was important, whether or not it was accurate, and how often people were actually doing it. So if I look at those 2 on either end of that spectrum, I see cash flow. It's accurate and it is more important, as well as the size of the bubble actually tells us how often they're doing it. So they're doing cash flow forecasting a lot. Pipeline forecasting, which to me is just absolutely critical, it's over on that left side, which is saying it is important, but it's not particularly very accurate. So that's pretty concerning for us, especially since that pipeline truly is the overall trajectory of your revenue forecast. So very important. The one thing I do want to talk about quickly, and you'll see these kinds of things within the GAGE report, is some techniques for pipeline forecasting. So probably a lot of you use PWin. So I can look at that. How likely am I to actually win that contract based on discriminators? What am I better at than my competition? Then we actually have another one we can look at, which is called PGO, and that is the probability that the government is actually going to fund that project. And as you get closer to contract award, obviously you're going to be able to adjust those percentages. And if you multiply PWin times PGO, you get something called probability of award. And I love this because it really takes multiple variables and lets you dial in more accurately what you think that pipeline forecast is going to be. The one thing that on this one, though, from a pipeline perspective, the one thing I think that makes pipeline forecasting so hard is that you have 2 very different organizations feeding that pipeline. So you've got business development folks that are going off and trying to win that business, and they may be in a different system. They may be in Excel, and then they're trying to pass that information off to the finance teams so that they can actually go in and forecast. So they can do their annual operating plan or maybe their long range plan. So there's that immediate disconnect. Chris and I were out presenting this to a group a couple of weeks ago, and we had a mix of business development people and finance people in the room, and they all agreed that that disconnect does exist. So to me, that's something, if you can work on that either from a process or a tool perspective, that will really begin to set your business apart. I do want to talk about project costs a little bit because I think it's very important in being able to look at that, see that. And I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about bottoms up forecasting. And I think that from a project cost perspective, that is definitely a methodology that we would want to look at, or at least have partially in our tool bag. Okay, so next we ask about forecast policies. And so we ask if your organization had policies on forecasting, and I'm looking over on the chart on the right side. So 53% do have policies. They have policies of some kind. They've got mature policies or basic policies. I've got 47% down below who have policies that are even being created. So to me, that means they're not using them, or they have no policies at all. And that's pretty staggering number to have such an important discipline and then not have those policies in place. And then we had 21 who are strictly following that, 31 whose compliance is flexible. To me, that flexibility means tailorable. So there may be some projects in your portfolio that don't require as much rigor in forecasting as maybe, say, a cost plus contract. So I can understand that. But then we had 48% where they're not using it, or there's no policies being followed at all. And I did make a little note for anybody who is an SMB. So it's definitely more no policies. So 25% versus 9% of policies are being created. And then no policies, 35% of SMBs versus 25% of large businesses don't have policies. So, one competitive advantage that you can gain if you're an SMB is to really look deep, look at those policies and procedures and start to create them and utilize them, even if they're basic. And Chris, you got anything you want to say on that?
Well, I do. As Kim knows, I'm passionate about this as well. I think a lot of people think a good financial forecast is really reserved for the big public company, and then when they get private equity investment, the PE owners want to see what the forecast looks like. Cash forecast is one angle, but largely that financial forecast. It is just as important for those emerging companies to understand what sort of strategic decisions you want to make on your company, whether that's a strategic hire, choosing which types of how you'd like to acquire, what contracts you want to go after, having that information so that when lightning strikes, when you lose a contract you don't expect, or something comes up for bid that you didn't expect, it becomes easier to pivot. When the economy changes, when sequestration hits, all of these different things, if you have a plan in place, it's easier to adjust that than if you have nothing. So I'm equally passionate about this one as Kim is.
All right. Okay. So next we ask about forecasting methodologies, and the two that we really used for this question was top down versus bottom up. And so let me just quickly, if you're not familiar with those terms, top down is a forecast that's created from the executive team. They create then a path that they think is workable, and then they push that path down to everybody else in the organization. And then everybody else has got to try to figure out a way to meet that forecast if possible. Then we have bottom up, and from a bottom up perspective, you're asking all the people who are actually doing the work. So you're asking those project managers, work managers, supervisors. You're asking them, what is it going to take to do this project? So a lot of times you're going to get, by doing that, it does take a lot longer, but you're going to potentially get better forecast, more accurate. So we have 43% that are saying that they really utilize top down. But the one I really love is the equal blend, because 36% say they're doing that. And that tells me that they understand when top down should be used, and when they should also be using things like a bottom up to make sure that you're really getting buy-in from everybody in the organization. In each one of these, there's a monumental moment in the back of these. And if you look up, the front cover of this report is a monument. And so we had these monumental moments. And so let me just kind of talk through one of the monumental moments about forecasting. Okay. So what are the benefits then of bottom-up planning? Obviously, we're going to get the teams that are working on it. They're going to be more close to that work. They're going to understand the cost and the schedule. You're going to get buy-in from the team. So they're going to understand what that forecast is, what the work they're doing. So they're more likely to own that. And it's going to be potentially more accurate. The pitfalls of bottoms up is sometimes that cycle time can go across 2 actuals time periods. So if it takes 6 weeks, then for the finance team, that's very difficult. They're going to be having to adjust for work that is completed. You never adjust for actuals, but adjust for work that's being completed. Also, when we're looking at that from a bottoms up perspective, the scope needs to be really clear so that everybody knows exactly what they're forecasting to. The other thing is, from a bottoms up perspective, it may not tie to those corporate goals. So, it may not be something that is workable. If you have if you're driving for a certain profit percentage, and this project's going to overrun, you need to be looking for other kinds of opportunities to fix that issue or to rectify that. And so it also may, if you're doing a bottoms up, it may keep you from really looking at those ways that you might meet that strategic forecast. So All of these things are in there. We also have in the back of the back, we also have the benefits and pitfalls of top down. So, these are the kinds of things that are actually in the report that make it evergreen. All right, so now we're going to switch to government compliance. And in this section, you'll see things like what are the top audits for 2023? Is DCAA auditing more frequently? What are those challenges? And so I'm just going to jump right in. So we ask our folks, what is your government oversight? Has it changed over the past 5 years? So we do see increased oversight. The interesting thing to me is that we see that really over in the greater than $50 million contract. Okay, so we're seeing more over there, and you're gonna see a trend on that, especially with time audits. Okay, so I think that's probably what is driving that in the over 50 million. We also see decrease. We have very little that's decreased, very slightly decreased in the 0 to 10 million, and a big group that has stayed the same, except for obviously the over 50 million, which is definitely seeing some increased activity around DCAA. All right, so from an audit challenge perspective, we ask this every single year, and for so many years, it was great timekeeping billing, and they would switch places year over year. Last year, we saw adequate business systems come into the fold, and it was actually number 2 last year, and it is number 3 this year. And we're going to talk more about those adequate business systems here in a minute. So I'm going to pass through that, and Chris will be talking about that. Again, we have so much more data, and you'll see this throughout the report, where you can look at things that really help you identify with your size business or your employee size, and you can walk through these. So from timekeeping, it is under $10 million. It is more challenging for them to do timekeeping. So, that may be telling us that, they're using generic timekeeping systems. And believe it or not, the other day, I actually heard that people are still using paper. And so if you're using paper, it will make getting through that timekeeping audit and making sure that is within compliance, it'll make it that much more difficult. And we see that same thing with billing in the under $10 million revenue band. So, those are things that if you have that generic system or you have a generic time accounting system, you may want to start to look for something that is purpose-built for GovCon. Okay, so just a quick plug for an integrated system. Anything on that, Chris, you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so. Oh, okay, no.
Okay.
I'll cover a little bit in the business system in a second.
Okay, that's perfect. That's perfect. Okay, so these are the top audits for the year. Just talk a little bit about how these are broken out. We ask these audits exactly like they're articulated over on this left side. Okay, so incurred cost submission. We're not asking if it's a full report or if it's a risk memo, but incurred cost comes in the hit parade every single time, and it is number 1 yet again. The other thing too is we also see that the over 50 million, which makes sense, are the ones who are experiencing the majority of those incurred cost submissions. There are a lot, at least in 2022. If you look at the DCAA report to Congress, we're seeing a very large group now that are looking at those low risk cost memos versus having a full incurred cost report. So that's very interesting to see. And then we also see, accounting system in the over 25, that's higher. So we're seeing more in that line. And labor floor check. So this is what I was talking about time just a second ago. In the over 50 million, we're seeing 40% saying that, they're seeing a labor floor check. So that is obviously coming back in vogue. I remember it was very in vogue when I was in the industry. And, it seems like it is coming back maybe out of the pandemic to make sure that people who have gone back into the office or people who are still working from home are charging their time correctly. The other thing on this report that's interesting is when you look down at the bottom, right here, you're going to see that 60% of the under 25 million have not seen an auditor at all. Okay, so that gives SMB a true advantage. It gives you time to think about and prepare for getting ready for those types of audits. Okay, so as you win that next big contract, being ready to meet all the compliance needs that you have. All right, Chris, and you're up next talking about business systems.
So there are 6 different business systems that the federal government kind of categorizes around, 3 of which are audited by DCAA, 3 of which by DCMA. And you can see them represented here. And so the question we asked was kind of around audits, but really the question I think is important to read. Which of the following business systems have you experienced as being required on new solicitations in the past year? And frankly, Karen Long, I'd be interested in some other time what your opinion is on this. But far and away, the accounting system, and I guess one other point on this, when the government asks about systems, a lot of people's brain immediately goes to technology. When they're asking about a system, it is more than just technology. Yes, the technology can help because there are some controls that can be enforced by technology that are great. But the government also is interested in, what kind of training you're giving to your people around your system. What are the processes, policies that you have in place to support your system and how it's designed, not just the technology itself. So think about all that people, process, technology, and strategy, if you want to add a fourth to that when you're looking at the system and when they're auditing it. But the question here is around when you're looking at a solicitation, when the government sends out that solicitation, what is required for a response? And so accounting system far and away continues to be from 22 and before, the one that they audit the most and that you see the most requirements around. All of these seem to be picking up steam each year, to include purchasing, to include EVMS and many of the others. And so it's important to remember that even when you're responding to a solicitation, I'll say this and talk to Karen some other time one-on-one, if you have a framework against which you can be, because it's the chicken and the egg syndrome, right? No, we don't have an approved purchasing system because we need to get to a threshold and purchase so much, and then they'll audit us and approve us. So if you can prove that you can get there, we have a system in place, we have a tool in place, and we have a process in place. We're confident that we can be approved. This is a great way to still respond, because the government sometimes is going to add this requirement to get fewer responses, to make their job easier for picking among the people that are responding to a solicitation. So just something to bear in mind there.
But before we move off of this, and this is not exactly to this question, but I did notice in the report to Congress, Chris, that in 2022, that their Director Dilly said that they had done 288 business system audits overall. And then when we were doing the interview a couple of weeks ago with General Bassett from DCMA, he said that these business systems were going to continue. And, we're seeing some, from a DCAA perspective, seeing some fall off in forward pricing audits. And so as that continues to fall off, they'll continue to backfill with these business system audits themselves. So, it's definitely something that everybody should be thinking about.
Yeah, that's really well said, and also a really nice plug, because I would imagine that Kim's interview with General Bassett is still out there. If you'd like to see it, it was excellent. All right, so we're a little bit behind. So the good news is we're going to give highlights on this. If you have questions, put them in the chat or come off mute. But A is the A engage that I'm going to step through in accounting. But all this data is here. We wanted to introduce a lot of these concepts so you can come back later. So some of the highlights, some of the interesting things that we pulled out. I mean, if just using round numbers, it was interesting to me that basically a third of the respondents, 27%, if you want to be precise, did not make profit, which is interesting. since most of us running a business are interested in profit. And it does speak to the competitive nature of being a government contractor. And certainly regardless of the contracts that you're running, if you have too many indirect costs that are not covering direct, et cetera, things can get out of whack. So you'll also see some, that have an extraordinarily high profit margin, 25 and 50%. So it's interesting to see such a wide and pretty even spread across this profit margin mix. Kim, were you going to say something? It looked like you were about to talk. No.
Nope,
Okay.
nope.
And then M&A, I think this is a constant question. Our industry is there's always you grow, you acquire, you make, and then new companies get started every year, and so we see this continuing this trend continuing. DSO, this has been a really nice trend. I feel like we're seeing generally an improvement year over year from the survey respondents. Presumably they're implementing systems and getting even better at getting invoices out faster and more accurately, and incorporating their accurate and timely subcontractor costs in those invoices that go out. A lot of times those getting those timesheets in correctly and getting the subcontractor invoices back and out the door are one of those things that slow down a lot of these invoices, and why you see really one of the differences between 22 and 23. You'll see that light blue bar at the top got bigger, and so some of the larger primes out there are the ones that are driving some of that. But it's also nice if you go to the bottom, that sort of dark orange bar is also getting bigger, where you're getting invoices out in less than 15 days. And that's, I'm sorry, getting paid that quickly. So that's compelling. And here's some detail on that. I won't go into too much detail. Highlighted a little bit before. So here's that invoice cycle where I was kind of alluding to earlier. Again, a really positive trend that we're seeing in the GAGE report are companies just more efficiently getting invoices prepared. And so this is a portion of DSO that we're talking about, which is just the time to prepare, review, and get that invoice out the door at the end of the month. And this is, again, a great story. Obviously cannot get paid in less than 15 days if it takes you 15 days to get an invoice out. So that will influence that number. But it's a positive trend, and obviously to the extent that you can leverage technology, automate collecting time, getting it on an invoice, making sure that it's done accurately, including expenses with receipts and the reports that everyone needs. That's what's driving this. People are leveraging technology better to get to faster, more efficient, more accurate invoices, and therefore getting cash in the door faster, which is the end all be all there.
Utilization, my favorite. In this section, we're going to talk about project management, and we're also going to talk about resource management and some of those challenges. And I'm going to hurry up just a little bit here. And so please, if there's anything that you want to talk about in any of these sections going forward as we kind of speed through to meet our timeline, please reach back out. So we're definitely seeing companies concentrate on project management maturity. That's really making sure that your people, processes, and tools are all in perfect symbiosis and firing on all four cylinders. And I think people have recognized that is tremendously important. And we haven't really seen a whole lot of change over the last 2 years, but we did see change. It's getting better. If you could go back and look at the 2017 data to the 2023 data, we do have a pretty large improvement there. This is one of my favorite ones. It's whether or not companies have a project management office. And I'm talking about centralized, decentralized, or no PMO. Centralized is definitely on the rise. And centralized just simply means that you have one department that's really concentrating on project management and making sure that those processes are the same across your footprint. If it's decentralized, then it's probably for one program or one project. And the reason I might want to use decentralized is if I have 100 projects, 99 of those are fixed price, and I have one cost plus large contract. I may only have that PMO for that particular project. And then we have no PMO, which is also now on the decline. Again, that is great news. From a project management challenge, resource management continues to be a big challenge, and Chris will talk a little bit about why we think that is so. But it's hard. It's hard. You've got a lot of moving parts, and you most likely have disparate systems across your projects or across your footprint. We also see inexperienced project managers. It has been on this hit parade for many years. I really like to talk about the PMI pulse of the profession, but I'm going to pass on that in the interest of time. But please go off and take a look at that for 2023. It's got a lot of great information about those soft skills or power skills, something that would be very good for you to take a look at. And of course, forecasting is another one of our project management challenges. It has been year over year. It was higher in this Pareto last year, but it continues to be one of the top three. If I look year over year, this is interesting information that hopefully when you get a little bit of time to go back, you can take a look at it on your own. So resource forecasting, Chris, this is all you.
So yeah, I mean, this is one of those head scratchers that we see where everyone believes that resource forecasting, resource management is critically important, especially for those people-driven businesses. But yet nobody's using a tool for it. They're all doing it in spreadsheets. And so you'll also see a correlation between those that do have tools integrated with a timesheet, et cetera, that are able to more efficiently and accurately deploy those resources, get more profit out of those resources. And so it's just an interesting data source to potentially support folks that are interested in that sort of integrated timekeeping, resource management, resource forecasting approach to managing the people.
And just quickly on that, we were talking about timekeeping being one of the big challenges for SMBs or really small companies, and we look at that integrated into timekeeping system at 18%. Okay, so that'll tell us one reason why they're having such a challenge.
Yeah, calling it out. I don't know if you can see my thing, but yeah. So I'm not going to go through this given timing, but in the report you'll see so this is a way for people to sort of grade themselves on how they're doing it at managing their resources effectively. The only thing I'll say right now is do not think that everyone should be aspiring to be a level 5 resource management group. Think about as you're looking at the tool, think about where you realistically want to end up. It may be that 2.5, 3.5 might be the right place for you. But there's a lot on this slide. I think it's great for folks to download the report and look at it. On time and on budget, I think most of Unanet's customers and most of the people I speak to think that they are unusually good at delivering projects on time and on budget. And what I can tell you is that people are generally doing pretty well for the federal government in delivering on time and on budget. The numbers are pretty good. Obviously not perfect, and frankly, the government's not a perfect customer because they change scope, change budget, blah blah blah. And so, what does on time and on budget mean when things are changing like that? So understand all that, and again, it's interesting to see that here. Is that me doing that, or are you doing that?
It was me. Sorry about that. I accidentally hit it.
Oh, that's all right. I think is this me still?
No, it's me, Chris.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about growth, and we'll talk about win rates, and some processes and things that'll help you in your growth journey. So the first two charts I'm going to show are just areas where there are other different challenges. So we ask about our biggest finance challenges, and lo and behold, both of those biggest finance challenges are some type of growth. So finding new revenue resources as well as organic growth. So both of those show that growth is top of mind for probably all of the different functions within the business. We also see what is the issues that are most concerning your GovCon organization, and it is obtaining and winning new contracts. So again, everybody is continuing to think about growing and winning new contracts. All right, so these two charts on the left-hand side, you're going to see the actual win rates over the last 12 months. And then on the other side, on the right-hand side, we're going to look at the projected rates. Okay, so if I look over 50%, people winning over 50% is 43%. So I take those two bars, the 25 and the 16, I add those together. But I also have a very large percentage down below who have a pretty bad actual win rate. So under 25% winning is 26%. So that has gotten a little bit better over the years, but it's still very high to me. So now if I look at the projected rates, when I look at the majority of the categories, at least over 50, those are pretty consistent. So I feel pretty good about that. And what we're now starting to see, though, is a shift from that 0 to 25%, moving up into the 25 to 50. So people feel like they're going to get better at getting those new contracts. All right. This particular chart is
and if I can add that the people
Please.
that have an actual win rate of 100% and a projected win rate of 100% are not bidding on enough. Everyone's going to run their business the same way, and there are plenty of lifestyle businesses that are perfect. If you're going to drive growth, 100% win rate is not realistic, and that's okay. And if you do achieve it and you're still going after things aggressively, that's great. Then you have different problems because you're worrying about how graduating too quickly without having the infrastructure behind you to really scale correctly. So it's all challenges that we get to manage. Sorry, Kim.
That's okay. So on this chart, you'll look at the actual is in the blue, and then the projected from a growth rate perspective is gray. And so we've had the highest growth rate ever reported on the GAGE, which is 70% of the firms. Last year, it was 59%. And we continue to hold steady around the 17%, showing a drop in their growth rate. So companies are definitely hopeful. You're seeing bigger gray bars in those higher growth areas. So 28 to 35, 42 to 48. And so people are bullish too about being able to grow their business and hopefully win those new contracts to do so. Okay, so we also asked about how companies were finding new opportunities. And hands down, it is personal relationships and partnerships. 82% are using that. Chris and I, again, we've done several lunch and learns where we go out and actually poll people live, and they agree with that. The next way people are finding new opportunities through market intel tools. Things like GovTribe, Federal Compass, Capture2. Those are very important because they can serve up information to you based on parameters that you put into the tool. Now, SMBs are finding more in virtual events and conferences. That makes a lot of sense because they're just starting to meet people. They're starting to find those partnerships and meet potential teammates too at those virtual conferences. We also then asked if people had a formal capture or gate process. 65% said they do. I think that's tremendously important, and it definitely will increase your win rates to have that kind of a process in place. SMBs obviously don't have it as much. I do believe that if a small business can put together at least some kind of disciplined process for taking opportunities to proposal, that again, they will definitely gain a competitive advantage by doing that. And as they grow up, they'll have that as part of their overall process and discipline, and will continue to expand that as they go and make that more robust. Okay, so now we're going to move into efficiencies. This is always a crowd favorite. Everybody loves these particular charts. So in this, we ask, when was the last time that you changed your indirect rate structure? We did have a large, consistent amount across the revenue bands within the past year. And then in 2 to 3 years ago, the less than $10 million folks made a big change. And then we also have, for the less than $10 million folks down here, 17%, they've never done an adjustment to their indirect rates. So, you know, we started to see a trend of people doing that more over time. A lot of that was the pandemic then, and then coming back out of the pandemic and trying to figure out where you were from a facilities perspective, etc. Okay. All right. Our next chart is about rates. I'm not going to go through these rates, but this is one of the highlights of the GAGE report. People love this chart. It just gives you an indication of what people are reporting for all the different rates and wrap rates by revenue band or employee size. Okay, and so it's wonderful to be able to see and look at that. Again, it's not the end all be all, but it will give you an indication of whether or not you're in bounds within other people in your revenue band. This one is my favorite chart. This we ask about full-time equivalents, and then we obviously take that down by revenue band, and you say to yourself, hey, how can I use this? You know, if you're a $10 million company, okay, then you may need 3.3 accountants. If you're over 50 million, now you're going to need 9.3. There's a lot of companies who see that very accelerated growth and have no idea exactly where they're going to go. I've worked for a company, and we're seeing some of our customers now where they went from, you know, a $10 million, $12 million business and had a $250 million contract drop on them. That changes everything. So these are just good indicators of where you should be or what you should be thinking about, and making sure as you look at your growth trajectory too, that you're looking at this and make sure that your rates fall in line with your projected growth in employees. This is a chart that we put in the back, really talking about small business. We cut this data differently than we cut the majority of the information. This is $0 to $25 million, which is what the SBA categorizes as small business, and then over 25 million. And there's a lot of information in this that you can garner. The main thing was this particular chart was not to chastise small business or say that they weren't doing as good. What it really is for is to show you areas where you can make an improvement, and a lot of this around forecasting and getting those policies and procedures so that you can make that next big jump, and be successful and have those forecasts out there for you to be able to plan with and make great decisions. Okay, so sorry we got into rush mode there, Chris and Karen. We're almost at the top of the hour. Do we want to take any questions, Karen, or what would you like us to do?
Yeah, why don't we take a couple of questions? I have a few. I guess if anybody has a question in the audience, if you want to put it in the chat, and Lindsay and I can monitor it. I had a question about you talked a lot about forecasting plans. Do you have some tips for creating better forecasting plans?
Yeah, and Chris, I'll take that if you don't mind, and then you chime in. We definitely encourage, in fact, I wrote a GovCon Wire article about that recently. We definitely encourage everybody, small business, large business, to make sure you're planning for that longer term. So, you know, you can't just be looking at the instant year. You really need to be looking out over some horizon, 3 to 5 years, at least 3, in my opinion, and see exactly where you're going to go. And then make sure you're investing in things like those systems, infrastructure, whatever it is you need, and that you have the resources to do that. Can't really figure out what those resources are unless you have a good plan. Also, it's really important. We talked about how important pipeline forecast is. So understanding your pipeline forecast and making sure that those teams, that BD team and that finance team, are coordinating with each other. And all of these forecasts then play into your indirect forecasting. So again, having a process for that and making sure that you understand all the components that go into that. And, you know, in sales and growth and where you're going with your revenue is a huge part of that. So those are just some basic tips that I think we can that people could look at to employ.
The other one that Kim mentioned during the presentation itself was using a mix, a blend of top down and bottoms up. Because I think when you start at a top down, you're looking potentially more strategically at things, talk about the objectives, where you want to get to, and then build from there. And bottoms up, you're able to enlist potentially some more input, buy-in from a lot of those folks that are delivering the projects, et cetera. So getting those to fit together is also an important activity. Maybe more for when you're talking about 1 year at a time versus 3 years, but getting them together is important.
But when I'm also talking about that 1 year, we can also use a technique called expected value. So we've been using P-win, P-go, all those different percentages, and it's closer to the project award. We can change to what we think we're going to get, and in that time period, we need to be sure we update our forecast in the near term for that.
And how often would you suggest companies do project forecasts?
Chris, you want to take that, or you want me to?
I mean, this one's it's a tricky question, I would say. It's not something that people should be doing every week necessarily, but it's also something that potentially they should be doing more than once a month or even once a quarter. I think it depends on the project, depends on the people working on the project. I don't think there's a silver bullet answer to that. But certainly what helps is having tools that integrate, as we alluded to earlier, integrate the time entry with the forecast, so that you can in real time see how you're trending against that plan, to understand what budget actual is going to look like, and then adjusting the plan based on that.
Yeah, and Unanet can make life a lot simpler if you use Unanet, correct?
Unanet will help with that process I described, yes.
And then how do you make sure that, or do you have suggestions about how finance people can get the information from the forecasting?
So I would say that one thing is to really, and I'm going to talk about pipeline forecasting because that's what's on my mind today, because to me that becomes your strategic forecast, but really making sure you have great relationships with your business development and your marketing teams, so that you understand what's coming down the pipe, and that you understand how likely it is that you're going to get that, going to get those projects, and where they fit into your plan and into your any of your strategic plans. So I think those relationships, understanding, and then putting in a process with some tools is absolutely huge to making sure that happens.
All right. And any other questions? I don't see any in the chat.
Yeah, I don't either.
And Kim and Chris, I see that your information, or at least your email address, your contact information is on the last slide, and we will send this out to our meetup groups, and we'll also be posting this on LinkedIn and send you a version as well. So thank you very much for presenting today. This was really interesting. As I was mentioning to Kim before this, I'm a wannabe accountant. So anyway, so really appreciate it. Lindsay, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Karen. We will be taking the usual month of December off for the holidays and resuming our government contractor chat webinar series every third Wednesday of the month. In January, we will have 2 times guest speaker David Stearman from Proposal Strategy and Development Consulting, a GovCon consulting company that specializes in business development, capture, and proposal development. In February, we will have 2 times guest speaker Daniel Strauss from Cordatus LLP, an internationally known firm for its practice in the areas of federal, state, and local procurement, as well as administrative and contract law. You can visit our events page where more events and topics will be added soon. We want to thank you for being with us today, and we hope to see you in January 2024.